It is now believed that this American attack against Iran is being prepared and that the United States definitely has the upper hand. However, Iran can put up a lot of resistance. And, in fact, it already has a strategy in place. Surprisingly, it was created by a high-ranking officer from the United States itself, who, by the way, did not end up receiving the best treatment in his own country. This strategy, which was used in some military exercises. And, well, it even had to be redirected in some way so that the official United States forces wouldn't look too bad. Now it could be applied in reality, in this conflict that is about to break out in the Middle East. The United States could end up getting a taste of its own medicine, or being attacked with one of the strategies that have been invented, used, or discovered. Were any of their military leaders responsible? Let's find out. The truth is that it is particularly surprising and interesting. The experience of a real confrontation between aircraft carriers and cruise missiles from all possible sides of a conflict in the Middle East. Well, it's quite limited. I mean, while the United States is there gathering all its power in the form of aircraft carriers, while Iran is trying to counter this with these missiles and, among others, almost in the first place, hypersonic missiles. What is actually the key precedent? Or, well, at least a minimum of military theory that we could base ourselves on? The Iranian model of attacking a carrier group is based on the concept of a saturation attack. But the truth is that Iran does it in a much more aggressive version than what used to be used. For example, in the Soviet Union, it emphasizes the breast. Drones, curious aerials. They gave information about the enemy's attack. That is what Iran does. I tell you, especially when the Russian Federation uses Geran drones. And before the Geran drones, even now, decoy drones have been invented. The Gerbera drones, which go, some of them as reconnaissance drones, but many, in fact, to attract all the Ukrainian air defense toward themselves. And once it has unloaded, and once it has somewhat distracted them, that's when the Geran drones fly in. And once the Geran drones have flown and carried out this massive attack, when the place is practically left bare in terms of the enemy's response capability, that's when all the attack power comes in. And it's precisely this kind of strategy that Iran usually uses. However, in 2002, the Millennium Challenge exercises were carried out. There, a conflict in the Persian Gulf was simulated. Retired General Paul von Reaper, who played for the Reds, was actually playing for Iran. He used a multitude of small vessels, civilian aircraft, and other rather analog tricks for the use of weapons and force coordination. That is, he bet on testing this Iranian strategy and seeing how it could actually work on the ground, even improving some aspects. In other words, the strategy was originally invented by Iran, in case I hadn't explained it clearly before. And in fact, it does have that theoretical basis, but it had never actually been tested as such against a United States force. But this general, Paul von Reaper, specifically decided to take it further. You know, in military exercises, there's one side that attacks, another side that responds, meaning one side acts for their own country and the other side acts as the enemy. He got the least appreciated role of all. As a result of a series of well-planned actions, the entire Blue Group was supposedly destroyed. They had to resurrect it so the exercises could continue later. Reaper, that is, this general who actually led the attack, supposedly directed by Iran. He was harshly criticized for his approach, which was considered by the United States in its military leadership as an unrealistic way of conducting hostilities. According to him, the results of the exercises were adjusted in favor of the blue team. In other words, he claimed that there was, well, little democracy in determining who actually won those battles. And he ended up calling the traditional United States military doctrine wrong and absolutely ineffective. Reaper was also criticized for supposedly cheating and playing dirty with his actions, accusing him, for example, that the motorcyclists who delivered attack orders in paper bags were moving practically at the speed of light. However, there is a theory that despite the criticism, Reaper's tactic was studied and perfected by the Iranians themselves. That is, what he somehow took from the Iranians, he ended up perfecting, and then the Iranians borrowed it back from him to perfect it once again. And what if they are used against one or two groups of American aircraft carriers that are gathering to finally crush Iran? The outcome for these carrier strike groups from the United States might not be guaranteed at all. That is to say, with this story, which is indeed real history and is part of the most recent military history of the United States, we put ourselves at the exact point where what now seems like an absolutely victorious attack by the United States could end up being a real massacre. Because, of course, where Von Reaper was being accused of cheating, or that his motorcyclists were moving too fast, or that he was somehow extorting, twisting the rules of the game, was it here or somewhere else? Here, obviously, we should mention the fact that from Iran, there are a tremendous number of ways to do exactly that. That is, all these groups that are in Lebanon, in Iraq, what we were talking about, Hezbollah of Iraq, for example, and Hezbollah of Lebanon itself. Then there are the Houthis, all of them, and we think they're going to play fair and give us a warning. Like that famous Spanish monologue, it's like asking the enemy, so, when do you plan to attack? Obviously, absolutely no one is going to make things easy for the United States in this situation or make it easy for them to come out victorious. Donald Trump. From an attack that is now being planned indeed as a total assault, where they will end up bombing Iran and subjugating it completely between the United States and Israel. But of course, the powerful, especially when they believe in themselves too much, can sometimes end up making fatal mistakes. And well, in history, indeed, there have been cases where David was able to defeat Goliath. And above all, here we return to the million-dollar question. What price is Goliath, in this case, willing to pay for the victory he could theoretically achieve? Because Iran, being in the situation it is currently in, will have to pay and is clearly willing to pay the highest price. From the Trump administration, I highly doubt they could say the same.